Something happened inside the Senate that felt like the political version of an earthquake, the kind of moment that makes even people who never watch hearings suddenly pay attention. Because Adam Schiff didn't just call out bad behavior. He called out something far more dangerous, something that could quietly rewrite how power works in Washington without the public even noticing. And the way he did it left the entire room stunned. It started with a simple truth nobody likes to say out loud anymore. Oversight only exists if the people in power are still willing to answer for what they do. And for the first time in a long time, a senator stood up and said, out loud, that this system might actually be slipping away right in front of us.
Helicopter for a military-style assault on an apartment building in a major city, the zip tying of children. What was the legal basis for this? I heard my ranking member ask that very simple question, that completely appropriate question. If that's not an appropriate oversight question, I don't know what an appropriate oversight question is. And the response was not just to refuse to answer the question, but it was to attack the character of the ranking member and to insult him. And then when it was Senator Whitehouse's turn to ask a question, he asked a very legitimate oversight question about a FBI undercover operation in which reportedly $50,000 was paid to the White House border czar prior to him becoming the White House border czar, but with the expectation that he would be helpful in arranging contracts when he became the White House border czar. What happened to the money? A perfectly legitimate oversight question. And rather than answer that question, in a closed investigation, not an open investigation, but a closed investigation, she simply attacked Senator Whitehouse personally. And I heard another one of my colleagues ask, what was the legal basis for blowing up ships in the Caribbean? Reportedly, the Justice Department wrote an opinion justifying blowing up ships in the Caribbean. A perfectly legitimate oversight question, and the response was another personal attack. These, what were apparently canned, written personal attacks in advance. I wouldn't bother with the attacks on me. I've grown all too accustomed to them for the last 8 years. But if members of this committee can't ask those serious questions and get serious answers, we can't do oversight. I'm new to this committee. I spent about a decade on the House Judiciary Committee. I never saw a hearing like this with a cabinet officer, and if I did and some Democratic cabinet officer were to personally attack each of my Republican colleagues, I would call for a stop to it. It would be disgraceful. And I understand the reluctance to criticize on your side of the aisle one of the Republican cabinet members. But if this becomes the template for future hearings, we won't be able to do any oversight, and things will just degenerate. These questions deserve answers. I would expect that if troops were rappelling from helicopters in any city, in any of your states, and hog-tying children, you would want to know the legal basis. And so would I. We are going to submit for the record in written form the questions that the Attorney General refused to answer. I would hope, Mr. Chairman, you would join us in submitting those questions. They will have a much better chance of being answered if you join us in submitting those questions. But I would hope also in the future that if a witness, rather than respond, simply attacks our members, that it be stopped. That the witness be instructed to either answer the question or to state why they're refusing to answer the question, but to refrain from personal attacks on the members of this committee. That would be my request. And Mr. Chairman, I'm really grateful to be on this committee. And I appreciate every interaction I've had with you. You have, in our personal interactions, always been eminently fair. If I didn't think that you were of that character, I wouldn't even raise this because there wouldn't be a point. But I would ask that we not have another hearing like that one, and that you join in our legitimate oversight requests. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thought that I set the decorum for a hearing, oversight hearing, when I said before we asked the director of the FBI any questions or any statements, that we should, both sides, treat each other with respect. And I even said to Patel, if you don't get a chance to answer your questions, I'll give you an opportunity after the senator's finished for a few minutes to respond whatever you didn't get a chance to say. And you know how that meeting turned out. And particularly from your side of the aisle, a lot of strong statements about the FBI director. Whether they were legitimate or not is beside the point. It didn't follow the decorum, and obviously the director of the FBI didn't follow the decorum. So I don't know what more I can do than plead with my people who are fellow senators to follow a certain decorum, and I assume it would be followed on the other side. I don't appreciate the insults that went to Democrat members, particularly where they were wrong, but after seeing how senators handled the FBI director, I guess I felt that just let the show go on the way the senators wanted to go on. And that's what developed as a result of it. That may be a weak excuse for what happened that day, but I thought things didn't work out the way I expected them to when the FBI director was here, and some of the people on your side of the aisle were some of the ones that were screaming and yelling and talking over the FBI director. Meeting adjourned.
No drama, no shouting, just a calm, cutting warning that felt like a line being drawn at the very last moment. Schiff waited the entire hearing to speak. He listened to every question, every deflection, every insult, every moment where legitimate oversight was twisted into something ugly. And when he finally spoke, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. He didn't turn it into a performance. He spoke the way people speak when they're genuinely alarmed, measured, deliberate, serious. And that tone alone grabbed the room by the throat. Because here's what actually happened. Senators asked basic questions. Not political questions. Not gotcha questions. Oversight questions. The kind of questions Congress has been asking since the beginning of the country. What was the legal basis for troops rappelling down from Black Hawk helicopters into a civilian apartment complex? Why were children zip-tied during the operation? Who signed off on it? What was the justification? In any functioning system, those questions get clear answers. Instead, the response was a personal insult aimed directly at the senator asking. Then came the next question, about a covert undercover operation that reportedly involved a $50,000 payment to someone who would later become a powerful government official with influence over contracts. A question any oversight body is obligated to ask: where did the money go and why was it paid? Instead of an answer, another personal attack. Direct, sharp, weirdly prepared, as if the insults weren't emotional reactions, but something written ahead of time. And there were more. What was the legal basis for blowing up ships in the Caribbean? There were reports that a Justice Department legal opinion existed justifying the destruction of vessels outside U.S. waters. Senators wanted to see it. That's their job. Instead, they were hit with another personal swipe. Again, strangely polished, almost rehearsed. Rumors have been circulating online that these attacks didn't just happen. Some observers claim the insults seemed scripted, like the nominee arrived with pre-written lines specifically crafted to shut down questioning. While that can't be proven, the rhythm of it, the timing, the consistency, made it feel less like a heated exchange and more like a planned strategy. Replace answers with humiliation. Replace transparency with hostility. Replace accountability with spectacle. Schiff wasn't shocked that she went after him. He knows he's a lightning rod and said as much. But he wasn't really talking about himself. He was talking about the pattern. The fact that legitimate oversight questions from Democrats were dismissed not through legal reasoning or procedural explanation, but through character attacks. And if that becomes acceptable, even once, oversight doesn't survive. It dies quietly, one unanswered question at a time. That he reminded the room that in his decade on the House Judiciary Committee, he'd never seen a hearing like the one that unfolded. Not even close. Not in the most tense years. Not during the most divisive political battles. Cabinet nominees are supposed to answer questions, even tough ones. They don't have to enjoy it, but they do have to respect the process. Because if they don't, the entire balance of power shifts. And Schiff made sure everyone understood exactly what that shift would mean. What shook people wasn't that he said it. It was how he said it. Calm. Almost disappointed. Like someone finally admitting the thing nobody else wanted to face. And then came the response from Grassley, the committee chair. He didn't deny anything Schiff said. He didn't defend the personal attacks. He didn't say the nominee had acted appropriately. He didn't promise to restore order or enforce decorum. Instead, he shrugged it off by pointing backwards, saying that previous hearings had gotten loud, and so this one spiraled too. A kind of political "what did you expect?" A quiet admission that chaos is now normal. That's when the weight of Schiff's words hit even harder. Because the moment a Senate chair starts blaming past disorder as a reason to accept current disorder, the system is already bending under its own weight. It was subtle, but it was devastating. Grassley's answer wasn't malicious. It was worse. It was resigned. Schiff wasn't just calling out Bondi's behavior. He was calling out the slow, quiet collapse of something foundational. Oversight doesn't fall apart through dramatic explosions. It falls apart through shrugs, through excuses, through tolerated breaches, through the idea that personal attacks are now an acceptable substitute for transparency. He pointed out something most people miss. If a witness refuses to explain a military-style operation involving children being restrained, something is deeply wrong. If senators can't ask where secret payments went in a closed investigation without being personally targeted, something is deeply wrong. If legal opinions authorizing the destruction of ships can't be discussed without the witness turning it into a personal fight, something is deeply wrong. And here's where things get even more unsettling. During the hearing, several staffers, according to discussions floating around online, noticed the nominee flipping through what some said looked like scripted responses. None of this is confirmed, but the idea fed into a growing narrative that some officials are arriving at hearings not to be questioned, but to perform, not to answer, but to undermine the process itself, not to collaborate with Congress, but to diminish it. Schiff's argument was simple. Once cabinet officials realize they can avoid answering by simply attacking the questioner, the purpose of oversight collapses. Because then every question becomes a provocation. Every inquiry becomes a battlefield. Every hearing becomes theater. And transparency becomes impossible. What makes this moment different is that Schiff wasn't warning about politics. He was warning about governance. About the machinery of checks and balances starting to grind and stutter after years of strain. About the danger of power deciding it no longer needs to explain itself. He said plainly that if this hearing becomes the template for future hearings, then oversight is gone. Not weakened. Gone. Because oversight depends on answers. Not applause lines. Not insults. Not defiance disguised as confidence. There's a theme that's been spreading across political analysts, journalists, and former government officials. A growing belief that some parts of the government have learned that consequences are optional. When witnesses realize they can stonewall and still keep their positions, when they can sidestep accountability by attacking the people asking questions, when chairs feel they can't control their own hearings, the system is no longer working as intended. And that's exactly why Schiff's words hit like a warning shot. He said that oversight doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes in moments like this, when witnesses show contempt instead of cooperation, when answers are replaced with accusations, when accountability is treated like a personal insult, when senators have to beg the chair to enforce basic decorum because even they can sense the ground shifting beneath their feet. He reminded everyone in that room, and everyone watching, that democracy doesn't collapse in a single dramatic moment. It collapses one unchallenged breach at a time, one unanswered question at a time, one dismissed legal inquiry at a time, one normalized insult at a time. What Bondi did wasn't just disrespect. It was a glimpse of what unchecked authority looks like when it starts to harden. And Grassley's response unintentionally confirmed the worst fear, that the erosion is already happening, and too many people have started treating it as normal. That's why Schiff's statement matters. He wasn't defending Democrats. He wasn't defending himself. He was defending the principle that people in power still need to answer for what they do. And he was doing it in a moment when it desperately needed to be said. He wasn't attacking anyone. He wasn't grandstanding. He was reminding the Senate that accountability is not optional. Oversight is not theater. And truth is not a personal attack. Because if senators can't ask questions without being insulted, if witnesses can dodge transparency by turning hearings into chaos, if the chair can shrug instead of step in, then who exactly is holding the executive branch accountable? That's the question Schiff wanted the country to hear. And that's the question everyone needs to be asking now. If you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, covering the moments in government most people miss, but absolutely need to understand, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and stay tuned. There's more happening behind the scenes than anyone realizes, and you're going to want to see what comes next.